compass. Kenny Singh.
I was born in India in 1979, in North India, in fact. I had the absolute pleasure to live in a region which was in the countryside of North India.
We were a happy family. We are a family of doctors and yes, so quite well off.
So Dad was actively looking for a couple of years for a place overseas to migrate to. They'd be moving to a country where it would probably be a lot better for their children.
Perspective shift.
I was born 2 months premature and I died twice at birth and had to be resuscitated.
Oliver Morton Evans.
I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy after about 12 months because I wasn't hitting the typical developmental milestones.
Oliver's parents, Michael and Christine.
He was a gorgeous baby, absolutely gorgeous. We were told that he had cerebral palsy.
We really had no idea what that meant.
Because cerebral palsy affects so many young children in so many different ways, I did kind of wonder, you know, where this would take us, you know.
Jackie.
Both my parents were, they were the kind of people who would have benefited a lot from more education than they had. But they were both very bright, very probing, and they encouraged me to be like that as well. I can't remember a time when I wasn't reading. I could read before I went to school. I can remember when I was quite small thinking that it might be possible to actually know everything. My mother was also disabled. She was born with only one arm. I never saw her expose it. She was always very careful to keep it hidden because that was the culture at the time. I think her life was seriously damaged by that.
How do you feel about seeing pictures of yourself at that age?
Very old.
Very old.
Oliver's with his parents.
My parents were instrumental in advocacy of mainstream education for students with a disability back in the mid-80s, where integrated schooling was not a thing at all.
A happy family photo.
He learned to read very quickly. He was 4.
And to type very quickly.
Yes, he was 4 by the time he was reading fluently, and we began to think that maybe the real place for him was in the local public school rather than in the special school. And after a great deal of hoo-ha, for about 12 months, Oliver was accepted into our local primary school.
A photo of Oliver.
The much more difficult problem is attitude. He was just another little boy, except that he had his own wheels.
I was always made to feel quite different. I was subject to quite a lot of bullying at school, and I remember one student used to line a ramp that was built for me with thumbtacks, so I would pop my tyres. That period was really the time that I built my resilience.
I've always been a very curious soul, right from childhood. And when I got diagnosed with this eye condition, I had a little door shut. I always saw myself as someone who wanted to be or who was going to be a doctor in life, and that's how I defined myself. So I actually had to completely recreate who I really was in my own head.
Kenny. Now a dense forest.
My initial impressions of New Zealand was that it was probably one of the most beautiful places I've seen in my life. I had never seen a beach before moving to New Zealand. The people in New Zealand, extremely friendly, extremely forthcoming, extremely welcoming. Nevertheless, because of the entire lives that my family had spent in India, it was really, really difficult for them to get adjusted.
A family photo.
It was in my latter parts of school in New Zealand that my eye condition got diagnosed. The symptoms were quite obvious. I began to bump into things and so on and so forth. So we went and saw an eye specialist. I got diagnosed with an eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa.
Now photos of young Jackie Leach Scully and her mum.
I was 8 years old when I became ill with what was diagnosed eventually as meningitis, meningococcal meningitis. That resulted in me losing my hearing. I'd lost all my hearing in my right ear. I no longer bother with that ear at all, really. It's purely decorative. And in the left ear, I've got about 5% of my original hearing left. My parents were a bit at a loss. The advice that they were given was that probably it would be best not to expose me to music.
A piano.
The music lessons stopped and the piano got left behind when we moved house. So that was the end of my exposure to music, really. I wish they hadn't made that decision, but they followed the advice that they were given.
Jackie's sitting beside a waterfall, surrounded by rocky earth and lush greenery.
I have been really lucky in the teachers I've encountered. When I was at secondary school, there was a teacher called Debbie Plummer.
I knew that Jackie was of the calibre to get straight into Oxford, and I wanted her to have that chance.
She was a woman in science, and she encouraged questions. And she was also somebody who had not only been to university, she'd been to Oxford. She made it seem possible for me to think that I could do that as well.
Kenny.
I got a laptop from the New Zealand education system. I got taught how to use screen readers and magnifiers. So instead of your eyes reading what's on your computer screen, this very sophisticated program reads everything out to you. I can even script my screen reader to do some very, very unique and powerful things and present information to me in the way that I can consume it the best. I could read faster than what I was actually able to do when I was fully sighted.
Kenny's mother.
That really changed his life. And then he started doing his work independently. He could read, listen, and type also his assignments. Then there was no problem for him.
It really opened up a world of social connection, of new information, learning, and the internet World Wide Web itself. It actually gave me the information that I needed to recalibrate the identity in my head.
Now a photo of young Oliver with a group of boys and men wearing brown uniforms.
I joined the Cub Scouts in 1988 when I was 9. When I joined the Scouts later, I became one of the first patrol leaders with a disability of an able-bodied scout troop in Australia. When it was announced that I would become a patrol leader, it was a belief there that I was just given the role because of a tokenism. At one stage in Cub Scouts, I decided to go and try and get my swim badge. My Cub Scout leader automatically thought that they would have to change the rules for me to be able to obtain this badge, but I didn't really want to be subject to different rules. If someone tells me I can't do something, that's the impetus for me to double my efforts.
A badge for swimming.
I swam quite a lot of laps in a pool.
He did the 6 and he got his badge and could say that he'd rightfully earned it.
Wearing a hearing aid, Jackie's examining abstract artworks.
There's a history of having sometimes disastrously low expectations of what people with disabilities can do. I was interviewed by the biochemistry tutor at Hertford College. I went to the interview there more or less with the idea that this was going to be really good practice for other university entrance interviews that I might do, the ones that I might actually get into. He asked me why I wanted to study biochemistry. I said, because I like biology and chemistry. You could tell from the expression on his face that this was quite clearly the wrong answer. And he moved next immediately to what did I like to do outside of school. So I said I liked modern dance. And we had a 20-minute conversation about forms of communication that were non-verbal, about connection between sign language and dance and gesture and so on. And it was a really interesting and nice conversation. It was in a physics lesson, and my headmistress came in and started talking to my physics teacher at the front of the class, and then they both turned and looked at me. They'd received a letter, and the letter was my acceptance at Oxford to read biochemistry.
Oliver.
When I went to uni, I started studying a Bachelor of Business majoring in marketing and doing a sub-major in entrepreneurship. I made a really great bunch of friends at university, and quite a few that I still keep in touch with now, and in fact I would come to work with later.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how I met you, but I guess maybe it was on doing a university project. I think that might have been it, because you had like group projects, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember what one it was, but we pulled a few all-nighters there.
Now Kenny's in a kitchen with his father Harjinder Singh Johar, his mother Gobinder Kaur, and his wife Tina Singh.
Once she's cleaned up the whole kitchen, I'll be like, we need some help. So Tina's family has a very similar story to ours. Her family migrated to New Zealand as well. I met her in a social setting, I think in sort of 1998, 1999.
I met him a couple of days after I reached New Zealand. I was really disorientated from just such a big move and change in life. And I found that friend in Kenny over that time whom I could really talk to and who would understand what I was going through. We're actually exact opposites of each other. Kenny, super chatty, loves having friends around, and just, you know, he's kind of the life of the party. And I'm actually the exact opposite. I'm super introverted. So we were really talking cheese as people and as personalities. Kenny was surrounded by lots of mates. It was very good seeing him with his friends, but sometimes it felt like he was trying to be someone maybe he was not, almost as if he was trying to make up for something.
That was the time when I was in denial, and at any cost, I wanted people to feel that I did not have an eye condition at all. From the part of the world where I came from, if you had a disability, you were considered lesser of a person, someone that needed to be looked after. I was masking my eye condition so I could fit in, so I could feel that I belonged to my university crowd and that I wasn't an outcast.
A book written by J.S. Scully.
I had been living in a graduate house, a shared house, on the grounds of the college, and Monica was the person who was moving into the room that I was leaving. So she came to have a look at her new room. On that first occasion, I wouldn't even let her into the room because I was looking after a friend's hamster. So I kept the door shut, and we kind of had this weird conversation through a crack in the door about, you know, that big. And she moved into that room, and I moved into the room literally next door. So she was the girl next door.
Do you know, I never did see the hamster.
Jackie's partner, Monica Buckland.
We were sharing a big house, so we'd interact in the kitchen and meet and chat and so on, and I thought she was really interesting, and so I asked her out to the cinema, and she stood me up twice. You stood me up twice, woman.
I think I've often felt in my life not marginalised or marginal. I'd call it liminal, which is sort of on the edge of two things. Being mixed race, going to a fairly elite university, but not from an elite background, not really fitting into these places. Monica and I got together in the middle of all the fear-mongering in the 1980s when the AIDS epidemic reversed a lot of progress for gay and lesbian rights. We had to be very careful who was aware of our relationship and who was not.
It was a weird time, actually, always sort of checking your pronouns. You know, if you're talking about my partner and I, never actually saying she. But I remember having piano lessons even after we exchanged rings and taking my ring off for piano lessons.
I also remember the look that we got from the jeweller when we went and bought the rings. And we were buying, you know, the same ring.
Look,
yeah,
absolutely.
When I moved to Australia, I applied for a lot of software development jobs, and Vision Australia was newly founded at the time. They were in the process of creating their first unified Vision Australia branded website, and they were looking for a web developer. I understood web development really well from the perspective of making that web development as inclusive as possible. So Vision Australia had a very inclusive culture. All the equipment being labeled with tags that were accessible to people with different cognitive needs, making everyone feel that they could do their best work with the support systems that they actually needed. There wasn't any hiding of my eye condition Vision Australia. I actually felt quite empowered. I was given a lot of opportunities to learn and grow. After becoming a web developer, I became a team lead and then an architecture and development manager after that.
My resume featured the awards that I had won and fairly good marks that I received both at university and school, and in my humble opinion, my resume was pretty good. So my first junior marketing interview was at a trucking company. I didn't tell them on my CV that I had a disability. The interviewer was taken a little bit aback by me. The interview went okay, but then at the end of the interview, he ended up giving me a toy truck. I immediately knew I didn't get that job.
Now an aeroplane.
I had already been offered a job as a postdoc in a place called Lausanne in Switzerland. When we moved to Switzerland, we still wanted to make a visible commitment to each other, so we had a private commitment ceremony, officiated, if you can call it that, by Debbie. Debbie had left teaching and become a minister, an ordained minister. Many years later, in 2008, it had become possible in Switzerland to have a civil partnership registered officially. So on the 4th of April 2008, we were able to go to the city hall in Basel in Switzerland where we were living and, have this done officially.
An animation of a pilot wearing a glass helmet.
At the age of, I think I was 30, I went back and studied for 2 years. I studied a diploma in animation and visual effects. Once again, I made the risk to go back at that age and study full time.
I was horrified. Here we go back to this business again where he's going to have no job. He might well go and study, and then we're going to go through the whole process again. I was wrong.
For him to decide to make a start in another direction, it was just another risk he took, another challenge.
A junior artist in an industry where a showreel is really important. So I put up the money to make that happen. We collectively got together to make The Little Darling a fully animated music video.
Two wooden dolls are smiling at each other. Then a wooden cuckoo bird springs towards them from above a clock face.
And off the back of that, we founded Big Cookie Studios, which was a 3D animation studio. During Ansel's second engagement with the studio, we got talking and really wanted to go into business together and shifting our emphasis of work onto virtual reality.
Rowan O'Reilly.
When I first heard Oliver speaking about VR across a crowded room, I was looking for collaborators. And I just picked it up and I just went, excuse me, sorry to bother you, but were you talking about VR? And he goes, yeah, I have a VR animation studio here in Newtown. And bing.
I met Rowan O'Reilly, who was a rehabilitation therapist that had been sort of pioneering VR for rehab for the last 5 years. And he was actually looking for a VR content producer to produce custom VR software for his new technology that he was building.
There is a word called serendipitous and it can be overused, but it is 100% descriptive of how that happened.
Within 3 to 6 months, we were in business together.
It was working with Quaker groups in England that drew me more into public engagement and then eventually into bioethics. I then had the very good luck to meet Christoph Rehmann-Sutter, who's now one of Switzerland's best-known bioethicists. He was a philosopher moving into bioethics and he didn't have a science background. I was a scientist moving into bioethics without a philosophy background. So it was a kind of match made in heaven, really. Christoph and I joined forces. We got a grant from the Swiss National Research Fund and we set up the first interdisciplinary unit for bioethics in Switzerland.
Steph, come on in. We look forward to testing this with you today.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Angel puts a VR headset over a young woman's eyes.
You should have the menu in front of you now.
Yep. Yeah, this is incredible. I've not seen this here. It takes 2 seconds before you're so immersed that you forget that's not real. And that's why I'm still cleaning the basin.
Is your arm getting a good workout with this?
Yeah, I'm really tired.
That's the idea.
As our business grows and we get closer to a commercial product, so too has the technology of virtual reality. I think people are now starting to really see the actual use case of VR in a clinical setting.
Attitude adjustment in the vertical direction. The first time I went to the Microsoft Redmond campus in Seattle, it was just absolutely incredible, and I just saw the work the people did there and the impact that they were having in the world. And I think the mind was made up then that I really, really, really wanted to work for the organization. I was successful for that role, and I was just completely over the moon with that. I mean, that was my absolute dream come true.
We had a big celebration. It was, many parties, and we had a good time.
So here we have the Seeing AI app on my phone, and I have a letter in my hand, and I'm just going to point the Seeing AI app to the letter, and let's see what it says.
Enclosed is a copy of the minutes from the recent annual general meeting.
We can all appreciate the role that technology can play to help level that playing field. I think it's enhanced and, in fact, enriched by seeing it through someone with lived experience and having Kenny step through with us all how our platform could be leveraged and some of the new features that were coming out, I know was eye-opening for many members of our team as they think about other applications for that technology.
Stephen Worrell. Now Jackie and Monica are sitting in a peaceful forest.
In 2017, I was elected to a fellowship of the Academy of Social Sciences in the UK.
Professor Wendy Rogers.
It's a mark of esteem to be elected to be a fellow. You can't just apply. For most of them, you have to be nominated by someone, so other people have to think you're good. So the arts one would be recognising her contributions via her philosophical bioethics work, and the social science one would be recognising her contributions through the empirical work.
A photo of Jackie and the man holding her fellowship certificate.
I had been at Newcastle University for 13 years. I was director of the Policy Ethics and Life Sciences Research Centre. I didn't see myself moving. And then I was approached by UNSW to see whether I'd be interested in heading up the new institute that they were planning to open, Disability Innovation Institute at UNSW.
Yeah, I made the decision that I do what is necessary to change the perception about someone with a different cognitive need being effective in a high-performance environment. The stage was absolutely bright. In front of the stage, there was this sea of black, essentially. It was very nerve-wracking, extremely nerve-wracking.
So, good morning all. My name is Kenny Singh.
It was a coming out moment for me because there's 5,000 people sitting there, and I had to be completely transparent and vulnerable to them on what my eye condition was and how that specific app was making a profound impact in my life personally.
We're only getting started. So imagine a world where you actually have Seeing AI or artificial intelligence get to the point where it can actually describe the world to the nth degree to someone who actually has a vision impairment. And finally, what does it actually really mean? To me personally, what it actually means is independence. It means empowerment. As Stephen mentioned earlier, it means a level playing field. And above all, it actually means human dignity. So thank you so much. Cheers.
It was a very liberating feeling because now the world was seeing me exactly how I was, and there was nothing hidden. I feel that it would have actually helped me a lot in my younger years if I had some kind of a role model who had pursued this career and had been successful in this career and had some tips and insights that they could share from their own experience. So the story that I was actually telling myself was that because I had an eye condition, that somehow made me lesser of a person, and I had to compensate for it. And bringing my full self to work has meant that my initial perception of feeling lesser of a person because I had this disability to almost feeling empowered, disability becoming my superpower.
Kenny's sitting and smiling in the sunshine. Now Anshul's putting the VR headset onto Oliver's head.
For me, success is much more than just making money. It's really about making a difference and being able to not only make a difference in the world, but to actually really be able to change people's attitudes about what is possible for a person with my level of disability. I'm such a firm believer in actions speaking louder than words, and by me just involving myself with as much as possible, with as many people as possible that don't have an experience of a disability. That has been the best way to really change people's attitudes, because attitudes are really the major barrier.
In his wheelchair, he's moving past tall trees.
I can see a light bulb moment in people when they finally twig that I am the real deal and I am doing what I'm doing, and really bringing about education around how people with varying abilities can make a change in the world.
He's in a high-rise city office and smiles. Now Jackie.
One thing I often get asked is if you could take a pill now and have your hearing back, have your disability removed, you would have it, wouldn't you? I'm honest in saying that actually no, I wouldn't.
A black and white artwork is hanging on her wall.
I've been deaf long enough that I manage my deafness and my life perfectly well in order to have the life that I want.
Monica's conducting musicians.
I've gained a lot from the things that come along with disability. It is me. It's part of my identity.
Jackie's wearing a contented expression. Filmed on location in New South Wales and Victoria on the traditional lands of the Gadigal, Birrabirragal, Camaragal, Darug, Gundungurra people, Kulin Nation, and the Wurundjeri and Wallumattagal people.